Hello there, everybody. Welcome in. I was just saying hello to Bean to make sure my voice was awake for the morning. So it's morning here where I am. My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author. My animal companion is named Bean, and of the 5 windows facing the sun right now, 4 are covered with curtains, and 1 is left open so that Bean can be laying in the sun. So I hope you're having good weather wherever you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. And we're going to do a wrap up today. So I have every 2 weeks, basically, I do a Wednesday wrap up with a little bit of jogging here and there when I need more or when I need fewer. So we're going to wrap up 7 books today. You saw the covers on the thumbnail, so no mystery there if you recognize the covers, but I'll be taking you through reviews and focusing especially on 2 or 3 of the ones that were my favorites of the 7. So we had some people drop in. We had Jim. Yep. And there you go. We had Eva. Hello, hello. It is almost a flower moon. So I put a little waxing, it might be waxing, moon emoji in there. Oh, speaking of the flower moon, has anyone here read Killers of the Flower Moon? Yes, I have. I'm speaking of the May 1st full moon, which is called the Flower Moon. And I have read the book, and it's a really good story to read up on in terms of historical injustices against Indigenous people and the current state of the power struggle. I didn't think it was that well written. Hi, Mike. Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening. Hello, Julie. There's a blue moon in May on the 31st. Oh, that's cool. So the trivia there, I haven't yet looked up the new moon date, but apparently there's a second full moon, which means there's a blue moon. That's very cool. All right, so we're in here with the calendar notices. We're in here with chat to say hello. I just had a fun quote. I've had this in my notepad for several weeks and I haven't done anything with it. I just love the quote, so I thought I'd share it with you and ask if anyone recognizes where it's from. Quote, "I am only resolved to act in a manner which will constitute my own happiness without reference to you or to any person so wholly unconnected with me." End quote. I just thought that was a great motto for someone's life. And I just thought it encapsulates the mood I'm going for. So I'm going to put it at the top of my notepad to read every time I come in. That'd be fun. Eva says, in 5th grade on May Day, my entire school went across the street to the apartments occupied by mostly elderly people and gave them little tiny blooming flowers. Well, that's really cool. It's a May Day / Bealtaine, which is the word for the Wheel of the Year holiday that is celebrated in Celtic culture, sort of pagan Celtic cultures. Core memory. That's really cool. I like that. Yeah, it's a flower moon, flower gifts. It's on theme, right? Springtime. And yeah, in English, I think we just call it Beltane. So that's the Irish or Gaelic way of saying it. All right, so I'm going to break into the first book. I'm going to remember this. Welcome to this Biblioserendipitous Wednesday wrap-up. Now, if you don't know this word, that's okay. I made it up. I'm giving Brian of Bookish Texan co-credit here because we sort of were trying to figure out a word and we ended up with Biblioserendipity. So basically, I use this word to mean when we are reading one book right after another, and for some reason they seem to talk to each other. So I had one that was like a really close connection between 2 books in this grouping. So I thought I'd call it a Biblioserendipitous wrap-up. If you're new here and you like nature books and you like fantasy romance and you like, I don't know, eclecticism, give us a subscribe and tell us your favorites of this grouping. It's a bit strange. So we're going to start out with a new book here that I bought because I was enchanted by the exhibition that I saw in Portland. So Ursula K. LeGuin is a famous classic sci-fi author. This is her Book of Cats. Look at that gold foil. And I went to an exhibition, and it had a lot of her paraphernalia from her house, from her growing up, from California, from Oregon, like a little model of her typewriter and her attic room where she used to write, and some of the cartoons of her cats. And so there was no exhibition book that I could buy that would sort of encapsulate the stuff that was on display. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's pretty close to encapsulating the cute cat cartoons. It is also a book of poetry. So this counts as my book of poetry for Poetry Month of April. It's just like fun. She, makes sort of goofy, Edward Gorey-esque, really, if you ask me, illustrations and little comics. And it was just a really delightful, whimsical book to read, and just sort of funny about her history of life with cats. So grab bag of multimedia and an author that I respect and admire, who's unfortunately passed on, and who is local to my area. So I thought that was a really fun, really neat glimpse. And since I couldn't get an exhibition book, second best thing. So there we go. I also use this as my poetry book for Mr. B's favorite challenge. I can't remember what it is, but there is a Storygraph challenge that was hosted by Chaotic Bibliophile, that channel, and they put in all the prompts from a bookstore called Mr. B's, I think in the UK, and I think there's like 20, and I thought, oh wow, I've got 16 already. I'm gonna do this challenge because I'm gonna make them all, get them all done, and feel very accomplished. Sometimes you just got to do that, right? So the 3 or 4 that were left, there was a poetry one, so I got that done. There's a children's one. I'll get to that in a minute. And then there was still a favorites list from the Mr. B's bookstore, which I'm going to read Memory Police for, which I got from Leslie. And I still have the graphic novel, and I'm going to pick that up from the library in another day, I think. Yes. So and then I will have completed a whole challenge for the year by May, which is pretty cool. But yeah, Chaotic Bibliophile, go check out their channel. They look awesome. And Storygraph. So Storygraph, if you don't know, is a website kind of like Goodreads that is owned and operated independently of the monopoly called Amazon. And I really support that mission because Goodreads is not really giving the reader what they need to track their reads, to be in community, to find out things, to organize their collection digitally. The Storygraph is sort of an upgrade. It's like it's struggling. I feel like it's struggling because when I open the app, the search function isn't available. When I open the website, it constantly needs to monitor that I'm not a bot. There's just a lot of friction to using the app and the website. So let me know if you have different experiences. Is this my locale? Is this temporary? Is this because I'm not paying into it? I don't know, but it's a little frustrating, but I'm not going to switch because there's nothing better that I have seen at the moment. So that is the first book, the reason why I bought it, the reason why I read it, the challenge that it can apply to, and a little Storygraph update. The next one is the other book that I got. I got it on a whim. It's a classic vintage British edition of Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne and illustrated by Shepherd. E.H. Shepherd. It's from the 1920s, but this edition is from the 1960s. And I don't remember reading Winnie the Pooh. I remember watching cartoons at some point. I definitely remember the voices of the characters from the cartoon growing up. And I thought, oh, well, maybe this will be interesting, like a relaxing, quick read, but like also maybe has hidden depths. So I got this from a thrift store and read it through. It's going to apply for the children's book for Mr. B's challenge. And so I'm down to 2 challenges or prompts left in the challenge, I should say. It is a bit quirky. I do like the illustrations. And it is a bit quirky. There's an Amelia Bedelia-esque quality to this, where the animals that live in the forest with some human characteristics sort of get the wrong idea about things, or have to do something wrong before they understand. And there's some dated things as well. So 1927 is when it was published, and it's 2026, so it's almost 100 years old. And the bear of very little brain, sort of admitting that you're a scarecrow without a brain, is an interesting way to approach something. There's a sort of tension between the narrator reading the book and inventing the stories of the bear, when the bear is also the toy of the person listening to the story. So there's sort of like a meta framing device, which I don't really understand. It's quirky. It doesn't totally have to make sense. It's a children's story, but it was an enjoyable read. Eeyore was always my favorite character. Piglet's voice annoyed me. Kanga and Roo, sort of late editions, couldn't really identify with them. Owl, know-it-all, didn't want to be associated with the owl. So yeah, Eeyore, the one who's got a constant blue lens on life and how things will go wrong, and he's always at the bottom. And I don't know, I guess it goes with my Enneagram 4 type personality. So yeah, that was a nice little detour for Winnie the Pooh. And so that also goes to the challenge. And before we go to the next one, catch up on the chat. Okay. Mike is giving us I'm going to star this, a link to a video to listen to later. Jethro Tull's Beltane. Oh, okay. So it's his favorite band and a song named Beltane. I get in trouble. I'm contemplating a tag project, and it involves a quote that is not only a movie title, but also a Shakespeare quote, which is very, common. But I think it might also be a song, but I will have to ask my potential co-creator. We'll see. It split up the link. Oh, wait. SBE. That's not the link. Oh, should be. Oh, I'd never seen that before, but I'm guessing that's what that means. Cool. Eva says, grab the award if you did the work, for sure. Swipe, right? Hello, Leslie. I just mentioned Leslie because of Memory Police and the Mr. B's challenge, because that's one of the prompts. Greg says, Ghost Readers in the Sky. I was looking the other day at Cat Wings, LeGuin's series of children's books about a litter of kittens born with wings. It looked fascinating. Yeah, and I'm sure there's like a lens you could bring to this, where you're like, her Sci-Fi says this about the world, and Cat Wings lives in this type of analysis, but I just like it for cartoons, so I'm not going to do a deep analysis of it. But yeah, it's neat. I just like her creativity and her constant engagement with possibilities. That's what I like about LeGuin. All right, so we've got one LeGuin and one Winnie the Pooh, and now we're up for the big. What am I looking for? Guns. That's what I was trying to think of. The big guns. So this quite natty copy, as it's another new Ursula K. LeGuin I purchased in the last couple months, is The Left Hand of Darkness, and that is silver foil. So I've got a gold foil and a silver foil. Apparently they think she'll sell, so they invest in the packaging on these because she's amazing. So that makes sense. Left Hand of Darkness I bought because I was doing a group read along. And you may be in the group if you're watching this. I think we're going to have a discussion at some point. I know Allie from Gentile Black Hole has written a blog post. I haven't read it yet on this book, but hopefully we'll have like a live discussion at some point. I think we were going to have it in May, but if someone knows in the group chat, let me know in the comments. I read this just sort of pretty much chugging along. I didn't have a lot to stop on in terms of notes and tags. There wasn't a lot of like show-stopping statements in there that sort of stopped me in my tracks. Basically, Left Hand of Darkness is in the Hainish cycle of novels. So I think there's like 15 or so books that are set in a certain world, kind of like the Pern Dragon Riders of Pern and Anne McCaffrey, LeGuin has a world where certain things are canon. And in this world, Earthlings have gone out to explore other worlds and colonize them in the deep past. And so this is someone who is from the Federation in Star Trek speak, and goes to explore this one world called Winter. And it's a planet, and they're trying to get them to join the Alliance, right? The Alliance is just about culture and access and political, knowledge, and not be threatening, just sort of get them in the classroom with everyone else so that they can trade ideas and survival strategies. I don't know. So we have this one alien on this strange world, and he's been there a while, and he's from Earth, so he's got the same basic setup as Earthlings. But he arrives on Winter and realizes that they have this sort of strange hybrid human, other mammal kind of cycle of what would I call it? Breeding, basically hormonal cycles where they're in heat and then not. And the non in heat is sort of a not hermaphroditic, but they don't have sex organs. They're just like a people on a spectrum, but they call everyone he for purposes of literature because this was written in the 70s. And then they become either men or women to have sex and procreate. So she's considering basically a society where you don't have the gender binary. So way before its time, I think, and just sort of drops it in on the side. There's at one point where I might not have tagged it, but there was one point where the narrator, which switches back and forth between the two main characters, sort of muses about the fact that the Winter Society is all about wholeness and sort of a pride reputation thing. And the Earth Society is all about duality and othering, and sort of meditates on those qualities of cultural expressions based on sex expression, which was interesting. So I enjoyed it, but didn't get wowed by it. So I'm interested in the discussion because I think a lot of people will pull out much bigger things than me, but that's what I got. And here's the thing, Winter is called Winter because it's a very icy planet, and all the different nations have developed ways to cope with varying degrees of very, very cold. And along that note, the other book that was very biblioserendipitous with this sci-fi fiction was On Time and Water, which is a nonfiction memoirish musing on changes in the author's life, Magnusson, who's an Icelandic writer, pretty famous in the modern day. So blue books, we've already been over. I like blue books. But there are a lot about ice, and the fictional one was talking about epic journeys across the ice and fighting nature and all this stuff, while On Time and Water is talking about also Icelandic actual journeys across the ice to visit the glaciers and the beauty of the surroundings and the harshness of the surroundings. So it was interesting to read these two together. I don't know if you would have known ahead of time, but yeah, glaciers and just musings about life and culture based on nature. Just really cool. Really, really cool how that communicated itself to me. Okay, so that's Left Hand of Darkness. That's Ursula K. LeGuin. That's the read along, and hopefully I'll get some input from others who are in the group. I'll probably tag them below after I think of this. And the Biblioserendipity bit. So let's visit back here. Mike says, I think the LeGuin live chat will be on Gareth's feed channel, and I think it should be as soon as this was the book for April. Yes, I think we wanted to separate. The last live discussion was in April, so he said we'll definitely make it a little bit later so that we're not clogging up things. And I hope you and I, because I just jumped in for this book as well, are not too many for the room for StreamYard, because it's 6 people limited for the discussion. So we'll see what we can do on that front. If anyone has a paid account, maybe we can sneak in. Hey, Mojo. Monique, fellow author on YouTube. Hey, everyone. Evening tour's done now. Need to clean off my desk. Are you still in America, or are you back in Poland? I know you were packing last time you stopped in, so I don't blame you if you just turned off all the YouTube while you were in the States and then are back to real life now. But nice to see you. All right, so the next one is on time and water. And I've got the little Icelandic flag for the emoji there. And this is going to be the one I spend the most time on because this was the most striking, the most relatable, the most current, just really, really impactful for me. So Andri Snyer Magnuson, copyright 2019, translation copyright 2021. So 5 years old for English speakers. And I've got loads of stuff to share. I actually went through these beforehand. It was like, no, all these are good. I want to share all of these. So buckle your seatbelt here. He has a variety of topics, right? And weaves them together. I would say it's like halfway memoir, halfway musing. There's the interesting table of contents, the all-encompassing silence of God's great expanse. So yeah, so he's written a fairly successful book before this, and this is him sort of, once I have a position of responsibility and some stature, I'm thinking about times past, what we owe to generations in the future, and that's why this is a great Climathon read. So Climathon, in case you don't know, is a readathon that also happens all year long about climate books. So that can be animals, that can be fungi, that can be oceans, that can be farming, that can be activists, it can be how to connect with your fellow people. It's a very wide-ranging topic thing. It's just how all these things bear on climate change. So one of the first things he talks about is language because he's a writer. And I'll just read this excerpt from page 8. When a system collapses, language is released from its moorings. Words meant to encapsulate reality hang empty in the air, no longer applicable to anything. Textbooks are rendered obsolete overnight, and overly complex hierarchies fade away. People suddenly find it difficult to hit upon the right phrasing to articulate concepts that match their reality. So I really like that he pointed out, our sort of métier on Booktube, where we're looking at words, we're looking at language and how it expresses ourselves, right? And when a system collapses, so he's talking about when we have these transitions where monumental change is taking place very, very quickly, and the effect it has on language. Of course, it goes both ways. Language also has effects on how we perceive change. But that was just a really profound acknowledgement that I don't think I've read exactly that way before. So I thought that was really great. He's talking about Iceland a lot in this book. I got to know a lot about Iceland that I didn't know. And a little bit of Biblioserendipity with another book that I read a while ago. The Library of Lost Maps is one of his memoir pieces. He says, talking about the college that he went to, I worked in the basement of the Arne Magnusson, different spelling, Institute for Medieval Studies. The institute was behind a locked door on the university campus. For some reason, despite having studied in the same building for years, I'd never once gone through that particular door. It was a mysterious threshold, like the so-called Elvish rocks, where Iceland's hidden people are said to live. I mean, have you seen Frozen? I'd heard stories of people who disappeared through the door never to reemerge. Inside, manuscripts of Icelandic sagas were housed alongside scholars who needed peace and time to pore over these treasures. Ringing the doorbell was so daunting that it felt more like pulling a fire alarm. I didn't dare push the button until the day I found myself filled with a burning desire to see what lay inside. I rang and was invited in. So I just thought this was really neat. And it's a great sample of his suspenseful and engaging style. So I really enjoyed that. And kudos to the translator. The translator would be Lytton Smith. Lytton Smith. So well done. I really enjoyed his Revelations storytelling narrative. And it reminded me of the Library of Lost Maps, which is written by a geographer who works at UCL and talks about this door that was sort of in the bowels of the building and held all these maps in drawers that were hidden away and just treasures to be found. So I thought that was kind of neat. Like, I hope to find one of those one day, right? Don't we all? One of the other pieces he talks about that relates to his Icelandic background is his family heritage and how he's got grandparents, especially. He talks about 5 grandparents because one woman married a second time and they were both alive. So he talks about 5 different grandparents, their different adventures. They went to America, they went exploring. They did incredible things. They linked to very famous people. It was pretty neat. So he talks about that. He comes into this like photo cache where his grandparents are explaining things and is just really impressed with these old time 1960s, I think, photos of being out on the glaciers, doing scientific research. Like the first bit of Iceland coming to its own, being independent and sort of looking past survival. So this is his first sort of foray into that. These are priceless resources. Some of the films and images are absolute works of art. Grandpa Arnie clearly had an eye for beautiful framing. He bought himself a scanner and a computer when he was 80. Most people thought he was delusional, that some rogue salesman had tricked him. But over the next few years, he spent entire days in his little office scanning all the old film. At first, he printed out the photos, but after he turned 90, he started posting them right to Facebook. There's material there for novels, books of photography, documentaries, so many stories that could be told. And I love this both for the concrete, practical bit about someone who is 80, 90 years old, still chugging along, transforming or transcribing, I suppose, photos and videos in old formats to new ones and sharing them, which is lovely. It's really hard to stay committed to a task that is so tedious and takes so long. But I'm so impressed with that. It's been tried in my family and hard to do, let's say that. And then also there's material there for novels. It's just like a little nugget of inspiration, and I can relate to that because when I go through my archaeological digs of treasure troves where I find things, I'm usually sparked into, oh, this would be a great story, a nugget, or this would be a pearl or whatever you want to call it. Something small that makes you imagine life in a different time with different people and how that would have unfurled, right? What story is this a part of? So I love that. That was great. Let's see. We've got, his little how did we get here moment where he's explaining a little bit of the history, both of the world and of Iceland, how we got from this like natural expanse to this industrialized apocalypse. So he's talking about the 19th century, the independence movement, the wars that basically brought Iceland into globalization. Europe burned, yet the war changed the world and gave rise to numerous industries. The aviation industry altered entirely, as did metal production. The nuclear industry emerged while mass production expanded, its capacity all too evident. The world's aluminum industry grew by 1,000% in just a few years in order to meet the war's need for bombs and airplanes. The US government instructed Alcoa to build 20 new factories in 3 years, giving them priority access to finance and raw materials. And then here's where I switch into a Galadriel voice. At the end of the war, however, production did not slow back down again. The aluminum industry found an alternative outlet for its products with the emergence of the disposable consumer economy. And I'm just picturing the opening to the Lord of the Rings movies where, what does Kate Blanchett say? Not all... Something like where the rings came back and the dwarves overreached themselves and, it's just like, it's not a dun dun dun, it's a little more subtle. It's the tone change where you're like, "Oh, no." So, yeah, his little historical backstory, piece is basically leading you into, this is how we got here, and then disposable consumer economy. And unfortunately, the very poignant, explanation of how a really beautiful piece of a alpine valley in Iceland was flooded to make a hydro power plant for an Alcoa aluminum smelter, which is like 3 megawatts or something ridiculously small, is just like the tragedy unfolding. And he says they fought against it. It was like in the 90s or 2000s, 2010s. It was like really recent. He was part of the fight. So just to see that sort of tragedy happen in your own lifetime is really poignant. Let's see. We also have, disposable consumer economy. He shifts to thinking about how we process things as modern citizens versus what people in the 19th century would have felt about survival skills and processing news and changes. He told me Stuttlakat would start to go under, talking about flooded by the week's end. I got a lump in my throat. I felt like he was sharing the death of a friend. He's talking about that beautiful Alpine Valley. He's talking about a person and how they felt. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those who have satisfied their basic needs ought to be better positioned for sublime perceptions of nature than the poor poets were in the Romantic period. We've managed to produce more than triple the amount of energy the nation itself uses. We have our fill of food, and our storerooms are packed with stuff. Why can't my generation speak freely like Helgi, which is the old Romantic poet he's talking about, instead of being muzzled with imaginary economic terms and rationalist discourse? Shouldn't we be equipped to look past our feet and sense the larger context? It's as if those in power, prepared for every eventuality, have set things up by ensuring people never feel safe, that they always feel hungry and scared and are always ready to sacrifice one more valley, one more set of waterfalls. And this is sort of adjacent to the tragedy of the commons, but it's his sort of linking it back to, well, if you're in the 19th century and existence was so hard, but you still had the capacity to appreciate a vast expanse of untouched nature and feel small in the larger context of God's great expanse, is what he calls it. Why do we, who have tons of food, tons of stuff, safe, why do we always feel hungry and scared and unstable? Well, maybe it's because the people in power want us to feel that way so that we sacrifice those things for their timeline, for their profit. It's really, really, I think, an interesting framing. Okay, and then last time I talked about this book, I was just in the part where he's talking about an interview that he got with the Dalai Lama. Now, the Dalai Lama came to Iceland, and a lot of people who might have talked to a famous wandering monk of spiritual significance said they had other things to do, said they were going to wash their hair because they didn't want to get on China's bad side. And China, Tibet are in conflict because the independence movement in Tibet, right? So, so this mid writer is asked if he wants to meet with the Dalai Lama. He thought it was a prank call until they called him back the next day and he was like, oh, yeah. And then he was super pressured because he's like, what do I ask the Dalai Lama, right? So he thinks and thinks and thinks. And then he finally comes to this interview and basically reproduces it, a lot of it, word for word, which is pretty cool. So he's talking about science, scientists, and communicators, and the fact that in language, we've sort of blown past this ability to understand the scientific report out, right? If we were able to take in these vast predictions and forecasts, there's probably a difference in those words that I'm not parsing right now, then we would be blown over. We would think this is the most important thing. This is urgent. We need to do something right now about climate change. But what he says is when things are that big, when they're a hyper object, to quote some of my earlier climate books, you can't look straight at it because you can't encompass it. You can't think about it all at once. It's too much. It's overwhelming for your brain. So you kind of have to look left or right of center and be like, okay, I see this part of it and I can extrapolate and I can understand a little bit of it. And if you do that for several different parts, you may get a better feeling of the whole, right? It's really great metaphors to explain things. So he's talking about scientists and why they aren't super freaked out and communicating this effectively so that people are also super freaked out. Let's see. So he's talking with the Dalai Lama, I guess. Don't you trust yourself then to write about the biggest changes to the Earth's most important systems since humankind appeared, instead of wanting to make a handful of scientists responsible. So the Dalai Lama is asking Magnuson about whether it should be writers writing about these things or scientists. And he responds, can't they write about their own research? And he responds, no, because they're not experts in communication. Without help, their knowledge is destined to fall on deaf ears. If you're a writer and don't feel the need to write about these issues, you simply don't grasp the science or the seriousness of the matter. Anyone who understands what's at stake would not prioritize anything else. Ding, 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 ding. So yeah, there's just truths landing like smack in the face right here. And this is why this book was so relatable and so striking to me. We need more radical action. Oh gosh, this one hit me in the solar plexus. He says, it's one thing to worry about a dam in the Icelandic Highlands, the Alcoa plant or the aluminum plant. Does it make any sense to worry about the whole world? What kind of Pandora's box would it be to get involved in these matters, to cast one's happiness down into this infinite drain? And that, my friends, is probably what some of you feel whenever I mention Climathon, that if you have to think about this stuff and look to the side of that black hole, that you're casting your happiness down this infinite drain. Like, what a cool way to express like that fear and trepidation of, yes, we know it's important, but what are we supposed to do about it? Not just what are actions we can do individually and ways to move big corporations, but how do we maintain mental health? How do we live our lives in some sort of fashion to enjoy our time here on Earth, but also work towards future people enjoying their time on Earth, right? Essentially. So I thought that was so good. Casting your happiness down this infinite drain. Oof. Ugh. Let's see. He's talking about words we do not understand. Oh, okay. And so similarly, the first quote I shared was about language, and when systems collapse, language loses meaning. This one is about in the interim, right? While things are changing. We believe words are easily understood, that understanding them is natural to us, that the world we perceive and understand from newspapers and books is the world we perceive and understand. It's not that simple. Not at all. For example, we're accustomed to letting words like global warming pass us by while we respond to far less significant words. Meme culture. If we could perceive in granular detail what the words global warming contain, they should be like the threat in a fairy tale. We should feel terror. It can take decades, even centuries, to understand new words and concepts. And he illustrates this really, really well because he talks about someone coming, kind of like Lawrence of Arabia going to the Middle East, someone coming to Iceland in the 50s before there was independence and being like, you should have self-determination. You're a nation unto yourselves. You don't need to be part of Denmark. And people were like, what do you mean self-determination? What is, we are in charge of our own lives. This isn't a big deal. This isn't a problem. So in the same way, the language of independence didn't mean anything to them because they hadn't evolved to understand the world and the relationships of different countries in such a way. He's talking about like the language that we use to describe this huge shift doesn't really hit. It doesn't really pierce our understanding. And because if it did, it would be like terrifying. It's really, really neat the way he talks about these things. What else? I have a couple more. He's talking about responsibility and harmony with the world. Everything flows by. Everything is eternal and transitory. The attempt to preserve anything is futile. So when we get into a space sometimes about letting go and being absorbed into the natural flow of things, it can resolve itself into defeatism and laxness and not our responsibility kind of feelings. He says, I could get used to this philosophy. Within it, I can find a tiny fragment of shelter from all the terrifying information, a bit of space to hold on to some sense. It's possible to let go and float downstream. But I'm afraid that future generations will despise that position. Someone who is 20 today could know and love another human who will still be alive in the year 2060. He does a lot of this like thinking, well, my daughter and her daughter and their daughter is going to be alive in this time, to sort of put a face to the time frame where we have forecasts for. Given the current shape of the world, we're heading towards such a degree of destruction that this emerging generation will judge all our lives as laughable and foolish. We'll be regarded as primitive and naive, just as people in Jorgen's time, someone who is like in the 50s or 19th century, did not understand the word freedom, and so let a small, unarmed group of monopolistic merchants keep a whole nation under tight rein. This is imperialism. Philosophical surrender would be yet another symbol of our unruly egocentrism. And just like art that pleases dictators, all our creations will be valued in the light of the devastation we know our way of life has caused. As a creative person, I think a lot of booktubers identify this way. Let me read that again. And just like art that pleases dictators, all our creations will be valued in the light of the devastation we know our way of life has caused. So if we adopt this cynicism, this defeatism, this laissez-faire, and just do our own thing as creatives, we are abandoning responsibility. We are abandoning basically any connection to other human beings across time and space. So an abnegation, if you will, of our humanity. He's so good. All right. And then the last one I tagged here, I think is also from the Dalai Lama. Yes. So he had the Iceland interview with the Dalai Lama, and then he invited him to come back whenever he was in India to interview him again later. So he goes and he does another interview. And here he's sort of tempering his idea of defeatism and cynicism. Well, what do you do if that's not the way? And the Dalai Lama, of course, is a figure in Buddhism, so that there's a little bit of comparative religion discussed here. And like, it's not religion, it's a secular morality that is to be appealed to have people act in concert. When I talk about secular morality, I use 3 criteria: common sense, shared experience, and the latest scientific research. I just thought that was really fair. And he goes on to explain, of course, but like, I'm not a religious person. Most of the people I talk to are not religious people. And we can't ground, you should do this thing, in a book that was written 5 years ago, right? We write books. We know what goes into that. That's not a thing for us. So how do we define a secular morality that doesn't other people, that doesn't divide people, that will have us all getting together? Well, scientific research, shared experience, we all experience certain things, and common sense, which we need to talk about that a little, because I'm sure a lot of people have different views of common sense. But like, thank you, Climathon, for showing me this cover and Storygraph and making me seek it out, get that book. We got some cool glacier photos. There's the author. Highly recommend. 5 stars. Language, history, a little bit of politics, culture, just awe and wonder, and community action across the globe. Like, get at it. So can't recommend this more for people who like those things and are interested. Whew. Okay, so take a break here. I did a lot of quoting in that book because I was very excited. We're going to take a break and say, yay. Our next 2 are going to be audiobooks. And then we'll close with the final book, which is Hanger On. Okay, so Mojo, I've been back for 2 weeks. Of course, my return flights were canceled and rebooked because of the strike with Lufthansa. I didn't even hear about a strike with Lufthansa. We're all about oil prices here. Had 2 books to finish this month, down to 1 with 1 more day to go. All right. Okay, so back in Poland. Very nice. I'm glad you got there safe and back. Yeah. Julie says, I'm liking this discussion of On Time and Water. Good quotes. It's so good, right? Whenever I say a book is so good that I'm going to do a standalone review, I rarely get around to it. So I hope you are fine with indulging me and taking up most of a wrap up around my favorite book of the wrap up and giving it a little star treatment. Agree wholeheartedly. Thank you, Greg. Yeah. It's so good. And Mike says some parallel to South Africa where J.M. Kwetse, I can't remember how you pronounce his name, said the writers all felt compelled to write about apartheid as it was such a dominant evil. He found that creatively restrictive. Oh, interesting. Do you agree? Is it restrictive but necessary, or is it restrictive and a aspect of conformity? Interesting. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so moving from Climathon in books and Biblioserendipity to audiobooks. So I read 2 audiobooks in the past couple weeks, one while I was driving and one while I was walking. The first one is has got some bearing on my travel in September. So yes, thank you to Libro.fm for both of these books. So that is how I read my audiobooks. Our Oaken Bones is a book by Merlin Henbury Tennyson. And this is a book about the Atlantic temperate rainforest, but is also a memoir. Let me see if I can share this screen and give you the cover view here. Make it a little big. No, I'm not inviting guests. There we go. And share. All right, so our Oaken Bones. I got a little dog bone there. So I love this, and especially you'll see it pairs really well with the last audiobook. But this is by a person who grew up in Cornwall in England, graduated, went to the military, and went out to Afghanistan. So there's some pieces in the book about his military service and what it took out of him. Then there's some discussion of like health issues and coming back to Cornwall to heal. He also got into a job in consulting right after that. And so had a very sort of high pressure consulting. I'm imagining it's like KPMG or McKinney or one of these like big firms that has like thousands of people. It just sends them out to fix problems with companies that are not really getting at the issues, but just like papering over things. But that's my impression. So he does that for a few years and can't do it anymore. And then comes the realization that he needs to heal. He comes back to Cornwall. He's in this Atlantic temperate forest where he grew up and realizes, oh, this forest is a great resource for people. Maybe people need forests. Maybe we should advocate for more forests. Maybe I should bring people into a retreat center in this part of the forest. Maybe I can make my life a whole different dream of reality. And so, that's going to appeal to me, right? I don't have a forest in my backyard, but I do want to invite people in to soak up natural world and heal. So he talks a bit about the military stuff. He talks a little bit about the infertility journey with his wife and how like that needed healing as well. And then he talks about COVID and all the nurses and NHS professionals who were getting completely wiped out and how he envisions like bringing people in from the NHS to heal and sort of soak up the forest. He does a little bit of the science, but repeatedly says, and I don't know much about the science of this and that, but then proceeds to talk about terpenes and aerosols and different things. So he does know some, but the next book will be a little bit more science focused. This is more memoir focused and like the progression of learning about forests and valuing them, and then a little bit of a fight with administration and with his father has a COVID health scare, and so they talk about that journey to healing and the forest's role in it. And it's a memoir that is really sort of setting up his life dream and his life work and is very compelling. So I was really absorbed in it and very impressed. Our Oaken Bones, Reviving a Family, a Farm, and Britain's Ancient Rainforests. The farm part is a bit about the history of the family farm. His dad came from Ireland to Cornwall in 1960, got this like very marginal upland farm on the moor, on Bodmin Moor, and tried a whole bunch of things. Tried cattle, tried sheep, tried boars, deer, like lots of different ways to make it work. And, the family farm in debt and this sort of very familiar story features in some amusing ways, but also time-worn ways. And then it comes to this like Britain's ancient rainforests, forest advocacy. So just ended up where I am, where we should all be, but especially with oaks. The next book will talk about beeches and how they're cool in some ways, but Merlin here really has it in for beech trees because they are not native to the temperate rainforest. And so oaks really are the species that anchor all of the ecosystem here. And, they're trying to take out non-native species so that it can thrive and can continue to provide these benefits. Beech trees came across Doggerland, he says, as I said in a previous video last week. And they are allopathic, which means they kill things around them so that they can thrive. And they so chemicals in the soil, but also canopy so they don't let light in for other things to grow. Whereas oak twists and turns and allows light in and does not discourage things from its drip line, which is like the place where the canopy extends to. And so you've got stuff growing up right to the base of the tree. It's very cozy. It's very Winnie the Pooh coded. It's very, like we can all get along. And, beech trees have their place. They're probably Central European. I'm not sure. I haven't read a book about beeches, but Oaken Bones is a fine case set up to advocate for keeping forests, keeping tree cover, even in cities. There's one part where he talks about a walk in a city, even while it is good for you, health benefits, etc., is not the same as a walk in the forest. And I'm like, you're right. So I've made it a resolution to do more walks in wild places. I walk every day wherever I am, but it's normally in a city. So I am near some wild places. And if I just made a little trip, maybe once every 2 weeks, I could get out and get some of those different benefits. So made a change in my life to be seen. And the bearing it has on my travel is that I was trying to decide between Cornwall and Devon and Birmingham. Birmingham is a city. So this is convincing me that I really want to go to a wild place. The structure of the trip is such that I'm going to have a lot of different variety. So I think sticking in one place is going to be the ticket. So sorry to anyone who is voting for other places, but I think I'm going to go with Cornwall. It's my first impression. It was my first thought. And I think I still want to do it. It's not going to be by the sea. It's going to be on the moor. But I mean, I'm a moor girly. I'm a forest sprite. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm pretty excited about that. So yeah, there we go. There's the first audiobook. Just visit the chat so that I remember what you're talking about. Mike says, morally necessary, but creatively restrictive. Gotcha. Okay. So not that you disagree with it, but that it's like, sometimes when you restrict something is when you are the most creative. I mean, that's a totem. That's a pretty widely repeated truism, I guess. Constance is here. Hello, Constance. You missed my gushing over on time and water. So you'll have to go back and check that one out. It's so good. Our Oaken Bones, also good. And, we'll see if I end up getting there, what I make of the place. So that would be really fun. And my other Libro.fm audiobook is called, and you'll see why this matches up so well, Our Green Heart. Our Oaken Bones, Our Green Heart. So we've got heart and we've got bones. So a little biblioserendipity with the titles there. This is a book by Diana Beresford Kroger, which if you have been a long time subscriber to the channel, you will recognize. I read her book To Speak for the Trees, which goes in much more detail about her life and her memoir piece. This says, subtitle, The Soul and Science of Forests. So she's, I think, in her 80s and narrating her own book still, which is pretty impressive. She's originally from an Anglo-Irish family, so she grew up in England and Ireland. Her parents both died when she was 14, and then she was raised in Dublin and the Lachines Valley, where she learned what she calls ancient Celtic or Druidic wisdom of the natural world. She went on to become a doctor, a surgeon, a biochemical researcher, but really has like her hands in the soil, wanting to get people excited about saving forests. So it's really the same mission, but she comes at it from a more scientific approach, I would say. So she's got lots of fun details. She's got words I'm not familiar with. She's got things about the trunk and the water delivery and the beaches. She's a fan of beaches. Everyone has their place. To speak for the trees, she talks more about the global situation and like the rainforest and the different medicines and the different things she's discovered over her like decades and decades of experience. Our green heart is more of an appeal to, this is our spiritual center. Trees are what we really grew up living amongst. Like, we're forest creatures at heart. And even if we've adapted to living in the city with lots of other people, we really need to remember, not only did we co-evolve with trees, we also really need trees to live. They make all the oxygen. So she's constantly calling back to our evolution on both a spiritual level and a scientific level. So it's a well-constructed book. I will say, when she speaks on the audiobook, every so often she drops the end of a word, and I'll have to go back and listen to something 4 or 5 times and I still won't get it. So that was a little frustrating. But I really enjoyed the book, the overarching mission, the feel, the appeal, the little factoids, lots of neat things. And because it's PeopleApril still, even though it's the second to the last day of April, I can say I have read several books for PeopleApril. So Green Heart, while it's less of a memoir, is still a person writing a biography about her own life and her discoveries. We've got our Oaken Bones, which is much more memoir and arriving at his own vision for the world and his own work. Merlin Henbury Tennyson now has a nonprofit called the 1,000-Year Trust, which is to try to envision actions on the scale of an oak tree, which is 1,000 years from the start of the acorn to hundreds and hundreds of years of life to falling down on the forest floor and completely decomposing. And some of these forests still exist in the UK, which is brilliant. So yeah, 1,000-Year Trust, and just a different valuation system so that things are not all just cut and dried economic. So he's talking about his life. What else do I have? I have Time and Water is also a memoir. He's talking about his family. He's talking about his predecessors and his descendants, sort of in this time musing that he does. So that's another one. Okay, I don't think Left Hand of Darkness can qualify. I don't think Winnie the Pooh can qualify. Book of Cats, perhaps. She talks about the cats of her life, so that also is a PeopleApril book. So there we go. 4 books for PeopleApril, and I didn't even try it intentionally. So that's kind of exciting. Have you guys read stuff for PeopleApril? I'll make that the question of the day because that's pertinent. Because we only have one more day. But I didn't go in with a specific list, but these were the books that I was called to read just because of the nonfiction subject. And yeah, ended up being excellent. So I'm glad about that. I have one more book, but before we do that, I just want to visit the chat. Hello, Gareth. Hello. Welcome. No problem. What did I miss? You're being very Thomas Jefferson here. Yeah, so the last book is the sport, if you will. So in Diana Beresford Kroger's scientific language, a sport is when the DNA rotates or like does something different, does a mutation like a virus, but in a good way. Sometimes a sport in a line of the same DNA means that they have a new adaptation to something that they need. And so then it'll go beyond to become a whole different line, species, whatever. This is the sport of today's wrap up, in which I've read all these serious, very deep, contemplative nonfiction. And then I was like, I need something different. So this is a shifter romance called The Highland Dragon's Lady. It's not set in the Highlands. It doesn't really concern the Highlands. The dragon barely appears. It's basically a romance in 1896. It's set in the countryside of England, nondescript, by Isabel Cooper. It's a steamy romance. There are a few steamy scenes, but basically it's a ghost mystery. The country house that they've just acquired is haunted, and then they have a seance to try to address the spirit, and the spirit gets very angry, and then they try to like fix it and drive them out, but then it just gets into the forest and it's like mad. And so basically, this is the backdrop to the lady of the house, the daughter of the house, and the visiting son's friend, who is a dragon shifter, to like get together, which is lovely. So if you needed a little break from all the heavy hitting stuff, there you go. This is one that I just picked up. I paid $4 for this, which some of you will gasp at, but you know, when you need a break, you need a break. So that was fun. That just took a day and it was a nice, light, like fun read. So that is the 7 books: Biblioserendipity, readathons, sports, and nature and Climathon. So excellent wrap up. Really enjoyed the last couple weeks and glad to share it with you. So have you read anything for PeopleApril? Let me know, and then we'll discuss current reads and upcoming events, because that's our last little segment here. Gareth and his wife just watched the King's speech to Congress. Oh, it's on my watch later list. I saw a few clips of it on TikTok. Checks on executive power. Very interesting. Lots about democracy and protecting nature, etc. Yeah, I think King Charles now has an emphasis on environmental things, but sort of a weird way of arriving at it. So yay, but like a little skeptical. But yeah, the checks on executive power got a lot of applause from the House, which I didn't know was happening, and I just saw it afterwards. So very cool. Mike says, my PeopleApril reads have been Richard Burton's Diaries. Oh, huge fanboy. Yes, we know. And Christopher Hitchens' Mortality, his writing after his terminal cancer diagnosis. Wow. Very powerful read. Christopher Hitchens. I think I might be mixing up the guy who wrote all the funny, like Biff, the Gospel According to Biff. Who's that? That's a Christopher somebody. Christopher Hitchens is the famous atheist. Is that right? Tell me who I'm mixing up here, and if they're both named Christopher, if I'm completely off base. That could be. Sounds awesome, Mike. Yeah, excellent. I love a powerful read. Gareth managed to squeeze some PeopleApril about Stax Records. Oh, nice. Highland Dragons Lady. BB. I'm in. What is BB? What did I miss? Oh, Gareth says when he was Prince Charles, he campaigned a lot about climate change. He feels strongly about it. Yes, I did get that vibe. But is it... There was something about like health, or I can't remember what it was. It just gave me the ick at some point. This is years ago, so it's hard to remember. Okay, Christopher Hitchens, yes, the atheist reflecting on mortality. Cool. Okay, yeah, Gareth would know, the famous atheist. Who am I thinking of that writes the funny books with the graphic covers, like the whale one and the Biff, the Gospel According to Biff, like those funny ones? Gareth might have read those. I think that's like a Gareth thing. Let me know. All right, so let's do current reads now that we got our PeopleApril out of the way. Stop putting a timer on. Oh my God. There we go. You hit one thing and it puts a timer on these stupid banners. Current reads, everybody. So the last book I bought, actually, for Independent Bookstore Day is a declutter book, Make Space for Happiness, Tracy McCubbin. I got this new. I like source books a lot. Source books do a lot of like sort of deeper literary romance. Susanna Kearsley is with source books, and she's probably the first person that I was like, ooh, this is a good imprint. I should like check it out. But their nonfiction line, I trust, I think. So I picked this up and thought it would be pretty good. So far, it's a lot more about emotional attachment to clutter, which is really good because that's the source of people who hoard. And, you know, I just got out of an intense session of decluttering with my family. So it's an interesting lens. She talks about like basically emotional needs that are clutter magnets, because if you can't get your emotional needs met, you tend to hold on to things or acquire things in certain ways. So that's been pretty good reading. I'm a little bit into it, maybe a quarter. That's my current read. How about you guys? I thought your king did a really great job with his unique opportunity, Gareth. Well done. Your king. That's a little thick, Constance. I don't know if Gareth's going to take that. Greg says, I didn't intentionally read anything for PeopleApril, but I just finished a book that would qualify. See, that's exactly how we do it. Travels with a Donkey in Savannah by Robert Louis Stevenson. You and Stevenson. There you go. Yeah. Travels with a Donkey. It's a famous classic. Like it. Christopher Moore. Oh, thank you. See, I knew it was a Christopher. There we go. He wrote the one about the whale, which I have, and Biff, which is a Bible parody, and loads of others. Thank you. Yeah, I know. He was a big deal too, and a lot of people like him. I think Kat might be a big fan of Christopher Moore. I think that's right. I think that's canon. If Kat comes by, she'll let me know, but I doubt she will. I've read 2 Christopher Moore books and 2 Christopher Hitchens books. Oh, there you go. So you're even. That's good. Oh, Lord. That was to the Your King comment. Okay, well, current reads, anybody? I'll wait for you guys to list those, and then I will talk about upcoming events because I've got 2 fun things that I've planned, actually, now that I'm back in my own space and I had a day of rest. I've got my planned out, which is kind of feels good. So Friday, I decided we're going to do remarkable mothers in literature. And it may be mothers that left the biggest impressions from literature. Because it's not the best, but it's the ones that I really think about and shaped me growing up when I was reading. So we're going to do Mother's Day feature on Friday. And then Monday, I have a special day, same time, different day. This is our sort of reschedule. Alan's Reads is going to be a guest on the channel, and we're going to talk about our buddy read in April, Songs of Trees by David George Haskell. So I just whipped up some questions. I'll send those over to him and then set that up pretty soon. This is a great Climathon read. It's not really memoir at all. He's very scientist-like in his delivery, so not much bio detail, but lots about trees, lots about different environments, a little about global inaction, but really, really cool stuff. Animals, plants, fungi, all the Climathon prompts you could want would be satisfied by this book. So very cool. So yeah, that'll happen Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. BST, if you want to tune in live for that buddy read discussion. All right. So Gareth says, it's funny. I'm not a royalist, but I do like him. Oh, okay. Okay. Our democracy doesn't get messed around by the monarchy. So it's okay. I've mellowed. Yeah, it's the special interest. I mean, the crown is a special interest, and they do get called out as big forest owners in our Oaken Bones, as does the military, as does the forest. It's not the Geological Survey. What was the one in Britain? Anyway, there were 4 huge landowners, and the crown was one of them that could do a lot for forests. But yeah, I've mellowed. Yeah, get in your old age, right? In your granddad era. They stay away like they should. Okay. Mike says recently finished Left Hand of Darkness. Yep, there we go. Buddy read or group read along. And Say Nothing About the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I got that recently in my haul, so I'm excited to read that at an appropriate moment. That's a good one for PeopleApril. Oh, maybe it isn't actually. It's a reporter, so he's probably more journalistic about it. So never mind. Yeah. I just went through my haul. I'm going to go over the haul in a couple weeks, which means that I need to keep it together and not put the books away, which is going to take up half my couch, but it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So very cool. Glad you liked it. Julie says, I'm reading Milk of Paradise, The History of Opium for Historathon. Very interesting. Interesting. Yeah. And speaking of milk, okay. Tenuous relation. On Time and Water talks about the link that blew his mind. Magnuson was discussing glaciers and the legends they have on Iceland about glaciers and how there were 4 great rivers and there was like a cow at the beginning, a sacred cow, and the milk of the cow is what brought the glaciers or something like this and started the humans, whatever, their sort of origin myth. And how it's so weird that when he looked into Hindu origin myths, there's the why can't I think of the name of the mountains that separate Europe and Asia? Himalayas. Oh my God. Okay, so the Himalayas have glaciers that are disappearing, right? And that's a problem because they form the 4 major rivers in Asia. And if you don't have glaciers to regulate the water cycle, you're going to have bigger monsoons and bigger droughts, and you're going to have no steady flow at all. So big problem. But the thing that they have in India as well is like the milk of the glaciers being sort of an origin myth, and that's how they talk about it. And there's a when you think about glaciers and you think about glaciers calving, Calving. Sorry, I'm stuffed up, so I can't really pronounce it well. Why do we talk about a calf? Because the glacier is a cow. Like, it's a herd. What? So it sort of blew his mind, and it blew my mind when I was reading it. It's so good the way he like dives into these things and shares his own discoveries. It's so good. So milk of paradise, opium, not glacier water, and Asian rivers, but there's a connection there. Lovely that Alan will join you in a live stream. Yeah, I'm excited. Greg says in May there's a group read of Rob Roy by Walter Scott. Very nice. I think I started that a year ago, maybe close to a year ago, and have not picked it up since. Sounds interesting, Julie. History of opium, for sure. It includes the history of tea, of course, very closely related, and opium coming into the UK and how you became a nation of tea drinkers. Right. Which came first, tea or coffee? I believe it was coffee. Coffee houses, 17th century. Tea wasn't until 18th. Yeah, very cool. It blew my mind when I learned about that. Leslie says, I'm excited for the Songs of Trees discussion. Yes, very sciencey. So I'm glad it was like given in a relatable, metaphorical way. Greg says, I learned a lot from Say Nothing. Okay, we got another reader. Excellent. Gareth says, I've decided because of a book, I've just started to do a video on palate cleansers in a way no one else does. Ooh, are you going to have ice cream or sorbet for palate cleansers in this video? Are we going to have a demonstration? I love it. Can we get milk from a glacier? So the funny thing is that the water looks milky when it comes out. Ice melt, like a river from a glacier, looks white. It looks like milk. That's why we have these origin myths, because that's where the water comes from and what it looks like. Who knew, right? Not me. I do not live next to a glacier. Leslie has Say Nothing on her shelf. Well, I have it on my couch, so maybe we should make this a buddy read. I studied Northern Ireland in the 90s in college and like the Good Friday peace process. But since then, like, no, very little. I think this is like pre-Good Friday Agreement history, but more detailed than I probably got into. Excellent current reads. Very, very nice. And glad you're excited for the upcoming events. If you're watching this on Team Replay, let me know if you read PeopleApril book. And yeah, very excited. April was a good month. Crazy weather, but that's what we have nowadays. So yeah, that's the update on the travel. That's the update on the books. And current read, away we go. Thanks for watching, everyone. And remember to diversify your reading shelf across genres, across author types, across countries, whatever you like. Get a broad view, because you want to be well-read, don't you? That'll come up in a bit at this seriously well-read tag. There's some great videos on that. So I will be thinking of my answers and get to that pretty soon. All right. Gareth, I'm in the warmest bit of the UK, so I definitely never see glaciers. Yeah. Well, you don't have any, so yeah. Update on the travel. I need to rewind. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and take care of yourselves. Hydrate. Happy reading. Bye.